Everyone knows the boys' show is different from the comics, but Homelander, they didn't just change him. They rebuilt the character from the ground up, and honestly, the TV version might actually be scarier. Because once you understand the biggest differences between comic Homelander and show Homelander, you realize they're almost two completely different villains. One is a monster. The other is a broken man slowly turning into one, and that changes everything. Let's start with the biggest difference of all. Show Homelander wants love. Comic Homelander doesn't. That's the core divide between these versions of the character. In the show, Homelander is deeply traumatized. He was raised in a lab, isolated from humanity, denied affection, and turned into a corporate product before he ever had a chance to become a real person. And because of that, almost everything he does comes back to one thing. He desperately wants approval. You see it constantly. Madeline Stillwell, the crowds cheering for him, Ryan, the mirror conversations, his obsession with public perception. Underneath all the violence, there's this emotionally stunted child who needs validation every second of his life. That's what makes Antony Starr's performance so disturbing. Homelander can laser a plane full of people 1 minute, and then look genuinely heartbroken the next. Comic Homelander is not like that. At all. Comic Homelander isn't emotionally complicated. He isn't searching for love. He isn't trying to fill some emotional void. He's just evil, cold, sadistic, violent. And the comics don't spend much time asking you to sympathize with him either. They're not interested in psychological nuance. They're interested in showing what happens when the most powerful person alive has absolutely no moral restraint. The show took that idea and made it way more human, which somehow made it worse. Because TV Homelander still thinks he's the hero. Now let's talk about Black Noir. Because if you've only watched the show, you probably have no idea how insane the comic version is. In the show, Black Noir is basically his own tragic character. Silent, damaged, loyal to Vought. But in the comics, Black Noir is a clone of Homelander. Yeah, literally. Vought secretly created him as a backup plan in case Homelander ever went rogue. But here's where things get completely unhinged. Throughout the comics, horrific crimes are being blamed on Homelander. Murders, assaults, acts of extreme violence, stuff so dark that even Homelander starts questioning himself. And eventually you learn, Homelander didn't do most of it. Black Noir did. The clone was secretly committing atrocities while framing Homelander for them, slowly driving him insane on purpose. Why? Because Black Noir's entire reason for existing was to eventually replace him. So he needed Homelander to snap. And honestly, I think the show made the smarter decision by cutting this twist completely. Because the comic twist is shocking, but the show's version is psychologically stronger. TV Homelander doesn't need a clone manipulating him into becoming a monster. He gets there all by himself. That's Scarier. And honestly, the show accidentally created one of the best TV villains in years. Because the show understands something really important. Insecurity is more terrifying than confidence. Comic Homelander feels like a force of nature. Show Homelander feels unstable. That's a huge difference. You never fully know which version of him you're getting. The smiling celebrity, the narcissist, the insecure child, the dictator, the emotional wreck. And every season, the mask slips a little more. The mirror scenes, the panic attacks, the dissociation, the need for constant praise. The show is basically telling the story of a man having a psychological collapse in slow motion. And that's way more compelling than just evil Superman. Now let's talk about Stormfront, because this is another massive change. In the show, Stormfront manipulates Homelander emotionally. That relationship matters because she makes him feel understood in a way almost nobody else ever has, which is terrifying, because she's also a literal Nazi. But in the comics, Stormfront is a man, and the relationship dynamic barely resembles the show at all. The romantic manipulation angle doesn't exist. And honestly, changing that was one of the smartest decisions the show made, because it revealed something important about Homelander. His greatest weakness isn't physical, it's emotional. The easiest way to control him is to make him feel loved. Now let's talk about Butcher. Because the rivalry feels very different in the comics, the show turns their conflict into something deeply personal. It's built on obsession, grief, guilt, ego, and revenge. But comic Homelander is less restrained, less patient, less strategic. TV Homelander understands optics. That matters. He knows how to manipulate public opinion. He understands branding, media, and fear. Comic Homelander is more like a blunt instrument. Still terrifying, but not nearly as layered. And honestly, that's why the show version works better over multiple seasons. A pure monster eventually becomes repetitive. A narcissist slowly unraveling in public. That stays interesting. Now let's talk about Ryan, because this might be the smartest thing the show invented. Ryan gives Homelander something the comic version never really had. Something human. Their relationship is twisted and horrifying, but it's real. Homelander genuinely wants to be a father. The problem is that he has absolutely no understanding of love, empathy, or healthy human connection. So even his attempts at fatherhood become dangerous. And that makes him weirdly tragic sometimes. Comic Homelander doesn't really have an emotional anchor like that, which makes him scarier in a raw horror sense, but less compelling emotionally. Ryan gives the show emotional stakes the comics never had. And yes, the comics are way darker than the show. And I don't just mean more violent, I mean meaner. The show is brutal, obviously. People get cut in half, heads explode, people get lasered apart. But the comics push things so far that parts of it feel less like satire and more like straight-up nihilism. Comic Homelander commits acts the show will probably never adapt. Not because Amazon can't show gore, but because some of it crosses the line from shocking into pointlessly depraved. That's the difference. The show usually wants violence to reveal character. The comics often use violence just to horrify you. And depending on your taste, that either makes the comics more fearless or way less interesting. But here's the craziest part. The show version might actually be more realistic. Not realistic in terms of powers, obviously. But psychologically? Absolutely. Because real monsters usually don't think they're monsters. That's what makes TV Homelander terrifying. He still sees himself as the victim. He still thinks people betray him. He still believes he deserves love and worship, even while becoming more violent every season. That's why the slow transformation works so well. The show didn't just create an evil Superman. It created a narcissistic authoritarian with unlimited power and massive emotional damage, which feels a little too believable sometimes. And the scary thing is, he's still getting worse. That's the part I think people underestimate. The gap between comic Homelander and show Homelander keeps shrinking every season. At first, TV Homelander felt more controlled, more emotionally human, more restrained. Now, he's becoming openly violent, openly unstable, openly worshipped by his followers. The performance is fading, and once Homelander fully stops caring what people think, that's when he becomes truly dangerous. Because the only thing that's been holding him together this entire time is the need to be loved. The second that disappears, everybody's in trouble. So honestly, I think the show version is scarier. Comic Homelander is evil from the start. TV Homelander is what happens when emotional damage, narcissism, and absolute power slowly fuse together over time. And watching that happen in slow motion is way more disturbing to me. But what do you think? Which version of Homelander is scarier? The comic version who's openly monstrous from the beginning, or the show version who still thinks he's the hero? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the boys, broken villains, and characters who completely changed between adaptation and source material, subscribe to the channel. Because honestly, the more you analyze Homelander, the worse he gets.